Hey everyone, and welcome to another deep dive. Today we are tackling deceptive defilements.
Ooh, deceptive defilements.
Yeah. What do you think of when you hear that?
Well, I immediately think of, those sneaky little things our minds do to kind of disguise our true intentions.
Yeah, exactly. Like even when we think we are acting all positive and virtuous,
Right.
there could be something else going on beneath the surface.
Absolutely, like a hidden agenda or motivation we are not even aware of.
And that's what we are diving into today. How these seemingly good intentions can actually be masks for some less than ideal motivations.
Yeah, those sneaky little defilements.
And we are drawing all of these insights from a book called Deceptive Defilements.
Oh, a great book.
By Professor Rorokane Chandawamala Nyakithero.
Yes, a brilliant mind.
Now, I know it's a Buddhist text, but don't worry if you aren't, a Buddhist or familiar with the tradition, because the concepts we are going to talk about are so universal.
Oh, absolutely they are. It's about understanding human behavior and, the ways our minds can trick us.
Exactly. So let's unpack his idea of deceptive defilements.
Okay, let's...
What are they really?
Well, think of them as like wolves in sheep's clothing. They present themselves as these virtuous actions, but underneath, they're driven by these unwholesome motivations, greed, aversion, vanity, you name it.
Oh, so even if it looks like we are doing something good, our motivations might not be so pure.
Exactly. And that's what makes them so deceptive. We can fool ourselves and others into thinking we are acting for the right reasons, when really,
there's a whole other story going on.
There is, yeah. It's like we have these blind spots in our minds. You see,
oh, interesting.
These defilements slip in when we least expect it. The book uses this great analogy.
Oh, I love a good analogy.
Yeah, it talks about these defilements being like burglars getting into a well-guarded house,
So they sneak in when our defenses are down.
Precisely. When we are not paying attention and not being mindful.
So how do we recognize these burglars before they break in and wreak havoc?
That's the million-dollar question, and that's what we are going to be exploring today.
Awesome. Okay, I'm ready.
Great. So let's start with deceptive greed.
Deceptive greed. Okay.
Yeah. The book gives us a bunch of examples of how seemingly positive actions can actually be driven by this hidden greed.
Like what?
Well, one that really struck me was this idea of, working for the welfare of others.
Working for the welfare of others. That sounds pretty good.
It does. Right. Who wouldn't want to work for the benefit of others?
Right. Exactly.
But here's the thing.
Yeah.
Someone with this particular defilement might be doing these good deeds, these seemingly selfless acts, but their true motivation is...
What is it?
Fame, gain, recognition.
So it's not really about helping others, it's about what they can get out of it.
Exactly. It's about stroking their ego, boosting their reputation.
So like that friend who's always volunteering for high-profile projects but never actually seems to care about the cause itself?
Yes. That's a perfect example.
Their motivation isn't genuine compassion. It's,
It's all about the attention, the praise.
Yeah.
And the book points out that this deceptive greed can even show up in something as simple as generosity.
Wait, generosity can be deceptive? I always thought that was like a good thing.
It is, but the book talks about how it can be distorted by the desire to make the receiver happy. So
what?
So they will give you more in return. It becomes this transactional view of giving rather than a selfless one.
So like giving a gift but expecting a bigger and better gift in return.
Exactly. It becomes about keeping score.
Wow. I never thought about it that way.
And you know what else is interesting?
Tell me.
This deceptive greed can even extend to expressing gratitude.
Really? How can gratitude be deceptive?
Well, imagine thank you someone not from the heart, but because you're hoping for future favors.
Oh, so it's more like thank you and hey, remember this when I need something from you later.
Exactly. Calculated gratitude.
Wow.
It's lacking that genuine sincerity.
That's wild.
And you know what else we can see this deceptive greed in?
What's that?
Frugality.
Frugality. You mean like being careful with your money?
Yeah, like being thrifty. But the book points out that someone might refuse gifts or offerings not because they are content, but because...
They want to be more virtuous.
Really. So they are trying to manipulate the system to their advantage.
In a way, yes. They might even think that refusing gifts will somehow make people want to give them more in the future.
That is so sneaky. And it really makes you think about how much of what we perceive as good is actually driven by something much less wholesome.
Right. It's about looking beneath the surface, and that's what we're doing today.
Yeah, we are peeling back those layers.
Exactly, and we are just getting started.
Okay, so we've talked about deceptive greed. What other sneaky defilements are out there?
Well, next up, we've got deceptive aversion.
Aversion. So we're talking about that strong dislike or avoidance of something.
Right, exactly. But what's interesting is that actions that seem to be motivated by positive qualities, like patience, can actually stem from this aversion. Really. So someone might appear patient on the surface, but inwardly they're harboring all this resentment.
You got it. They're not truly letting go of the anger or hurt. They're just suppressing it, wearing a mask.
A mask of patience.
Exactly. And then there's this idea of harmlessness.
Harmlessness, okay.
The book gives this really interesting example. Someone killing a snake not out of compassion for, say, a toad the snake might be about to eat, but out of pure hatred for snakes.
Oh, wow. So the action might look like it's motivated by nonviolence, but the real driving force is aversion.
Exactly. It's a great illustration of how easy it is to deceive ourselves into thinking our actions are justified when they're actually coming from a pretty dark place.
It really is. And so it sounds like even something like renunciation, that idea of letting go of worldly attachments, can be twisted by aversion as well.
You're catching on quickly. It can be. The book points out how renunciation can sometimes be a way of expressing aversion toward the world, like rejecting everything and everyone out of bitterness or disappointment rather than genuine detachment.
So it's not about finding peace, but about running away.
Exactly. And even generosity, which we usually associate with kindness and compassion.
Yes, generosity.
Can be distorted by aversion, too, you know.
How so?
Imagine someone giving away their possessions, not out of compassion, but because they're actually repulsed by them.
Oh, like they've tried to cleanse themselves of anything they dislike.
Precisely. And it can also show up in how we relate to others, like this idea of avoiding the undisciplined.
Avoiding the undisciplined. Okay.
It seems like a positive action on the surface, right? Protecting yourself from negative influences.
Right.
But it can actually stem from aversion towards those who don't conform to our standards of behavior.
So it's like judging and excluding people who are different, rather than trying to understand them.
Exactly. And then there's frugality again.
Frugality. Oh, right. We talked about that with greed.
Yeah, but it can be driven by aversion, too. Imagine someone refusing help or offerings, not because they're content, but because they dislike the giver.
So even if they could benefit from the help, they would rather struggle than accept it from someone they have an issue with.
You got it. It's fascinating how these subtle forms of aversion can taint even the simplest actions.
It really is. And it sounds like this aversion can even affect how we communicate.
You're on a roll. The book discusses this idea of using necessary speech, which sounds positive.
Right, like being mindful and intentional with your words.
Exactly. But it can be distorted by aversion, becoming about being overly concise and avoiding any elaborate or expressive language. You know, not because you are trying to be mindful, but because you just dislike communication itself.
Oh, wow. So it's not about being mindful. It's about shutting down communication.
Exactly.
This is all so interesting, and it really makes you think twice about those seemingly good actions.
It does, doesn't it? It's all about recognizing those masks, those subtle ways we can deceive ourselves and others.
Absolutely. So we have covered deceptive greed and aversion. What's next?
Well, we can't forget about deceptive vanity. And that one, my friend, is a whole other beast.
Oh, I bet it is. Vanity, that desire to look good and feel superior. Didn't we touch on this before with humility?
We did, but there is so much more to unhack when it comes to this sneaky defilement.
Okay, I am all ears. Bring on the deceptive vanity.
I'll save that for our next segment. We've got a lot more to uncover.
You've got me hooked. Can't wait to dive back in.
Me too. This is going to be good.
Awesome. Until then, everyone, stay mindful. Welcome back to our deep dive, everyone. We are picking up right where we left off, with these deceptive defilements.
These sneaky little mental factors that can really disguise themselves as something much more wholesome.
Yeah, and last time we were talking about how greed, even greed can masquerade as generosity and kindness.
Exactly. Like we think we are being generous, but really it's all about what we can get in return.
Right. Or how even respect can be twisted by these selfish desires.
Absolutely, it can.
It's crazy how these defilements can kind of hijack our good intentions.
It really is. It's like we are wearing these masks, thinking we're being all virtuous, but there's this hidden agenda lurking underneath.
It's a little unsettling when you really start to think about it.
Yeah, well, that's the point of this deep dive, right? To bring these things to light and, help us become more aware.
Exactly. Awareness is key.
It is. So before we move on to other types of deceptive defilements, I want to go back to this idea of working for the welfare of others for a minute.
Okay, working for the welfare of others. We talked about that last time, right?
Yeah, we talked about how it can be a mask for seeking recognition and praise.
Right. Like those people who are always volunteering for the most visible projects, but don't actually seem to care about the cause itself.
Exactly. They just want the attention and the accolades.
The "look at me, I'm such a good person" award.
Yeah. But the book also talks about how this defilement can manifest in another way.
Oh, really? Tell me more.
Well, someone might appear to be working for the benefit of others, but their true motivation is to gain power or influence.
Oh, so it's not just about recognition, it's about control.
You got it. It's about pulling strings from behind the scenes, manipulating people to do what they want.
Using their good deeds to get ahead.
Precisely. They might be involved in charities or social causes, but it's all about furthering their own agenda.
So they present themselves as these selfless leaders when really they're just power hungry.
Exactly. And this type of deceptive greed can also show up in how someone chooses who to help.
What do you mean?
Well, they might only extend a hand to those who can offer something in return.
Like money or favors.
Right, or social standing, connections, you name it.
So it's not about genuine compassion, it's like a calculated investment.
That's a good way to put it. Every action is weighed against its potential return.
And it sounds like this can also show up in their behavior, right? Like how they talk about their good deeds.
Absolutely. They might make a big show of their donations or their volunteer work, hoping to garner praise and admiration.
So they're not just content with helping, they need everyone to know about it.
They do. It becomes all about self-promotion.
It's almost like they're using generosity as a marketing tool.
That's an interesting way to think about it. It's like, look at me, I'm so generous, aren't I great?
Right. When real generosity, should be done quietly and without any expectation of reward.
Absolutely. It's about the intention behind the action, not the fanfare that surrounds it.
I like that. So we've talked about deceptive greed and working for the welfare of others. But the book also mentions how something as simple as showing respect can be twisted by greed, right?
Yes, that's another fascinating example. We usually think of respect as a positive quality.
Right, acknowledging someone's worth, treating them with dignity.
Exactly. But the book talks about this deceptive form of respect called apekchakata.
Apekchakata. Okay, I'm going to need you to break that down for me.
Sure. It literally translates to willingness to show respect.
Okay, but there's got to be more to it than that, right?
There is, because in this context, it's about showing respect with an ulterior motive.
Ah, so it's not genuine respect. There's an hidden agenda.
Precisely. It's about trying to get something out of the person you are showing respect to.
So like someone who is super obedient to their parents just because they are hoping for a big inheritance.
That's a great example. Or someone who is overly helpful to their boss just to get a promotion.
Using respect as a ladder to climb.
Exactly. It's about manipulating the situation to your advantage.
Wow, it's pretty amazing how these defilements can twist even the most seemingly innocent actions.
It really is. And it makes you wonder how much of our behavior is truly motivated by genuine kindness and respect, and how much is influenced by these subtle desires.
Right. It's a little unsettling.
Yeah, it can be. But, that's why we are having these conversations, to help us become more aware of these tendencies so we can start making more conscious choices.
I love that. So we have talked about deceptive greed, but we've got more to uncover when it comes to these deceptive defilements, right?
We do. Next time we'll be diving into deceptive aversion and vanity.
Oh, I can't wait. This is getting good.
It is. Stay tuned.
All right, welcome back to our final deep dive into these deceptive defilements.
Yeah, it's been quite a journey so far, hasn't it? Uncovering all these sneaky ways our minds can trick us.
It has. It really has. We've talked about how greed can disguise itself as generosity, and how even kindness and respect, can be twisted by these less than ideal motives.
Right, exactly. Peeling back the layers, exposing the masks we wear.
And last time we left off talking about deceptive aversion.
Ah, yes, aversion. A tricky one, but very insightful to explore.
Yeah, for sure. Now, remind me, how can aversion be deceptive? I mean, it's basically a strong dislike or avoidance, right?
It is, but it can be so subtle and deceptive. We might think we're acting out of positive motives like renunciation.
Oh, right. Letting go of those worldly attachments. I remember we touched on this before.
Yeah, and it can be a genuinely positive thing, of course.
Right.
But the book describes a form of renunciation that actually stems from aversion. They call it danakamata.
Okay, danakamata. What's that all about?
Well, it means generosity born of aversion. Basically, giving things away not out of true compassion or detachment, but because you actually dislike them, you're repulsed by them.
Oh, so it's not about letting go, it's about pushing away.
Exactly. It's that aversion driving the action, not a genuine desire to simplify or detach.
So, imagine someone who gives away all their possessions, but not because they've reached this higher level of understanding about the nature of material things.
Right.
But because they actually just hate having stuff, they see it as bad or corrupting or something.
That's it. They haven't truly let go. They've just transferred their aversion to something else.
It's like trading one problem for another.
Exactly. And this can even manifest in how someone uses resources,
Oh, okay. How so?
Well, someone with this deceptive aversion might be very, very meticulous about only using the bare minimum of anything.
Like really frugal, almost to an extreme.
Yes. But it's not about mindfulness or sustainability. It's about that deep-seated aversion to anything beyond the absolute necessities.
So they're almost punishing themselves or trying to show off how little they need.
Right. It becomes this performance. Look how detached I am.
But really, it's all coming from a place of fear and aversion.
Exactly. And we also talked about how aversion can show up in our speech.
Oh, right. That thing about limiting speech.
Yeah, but the book talks about a specific form of this called mitabanita, which means using necessary speech.
Okay, so it sounds like being mindful, choosing your words carefully.
It does, right? But in this case, it's about being so concise, avoiding any kind of elaborate or expressive language, not out of mindfulness, but out of this aversion to communication itself.
So it's not about being thoughtful, it's about shutting down.
Exactly. Like you just don't want to connect with the other person at all.
Wow, it's amazing how these defilements can twist even the most positive-sounding things.
It really is. It's all about being aware,
Right, always check in those motivations.
Exactly. So we've covered deceptive greed and aversion. Now for the grand finale.
Oh yeah, deceptive vanity. This is the one I've been waiting for.
It's a sneaky one, for sure.
Yeah, we talked about how even humility can be a mask for vanity, right?
We did. Remember those folks who are always downplaying their achievements?
Oh yeah, bragging about how humble they are, it's hilarious.
It is, but there's more. The book also describes how even the desire to do good deeds can be driven by vanity.
Really? So it's not about genuine altruism, but about feeling superior to others.
You got it. They might be super involved in charities or religious practices, but it's all about feeding that ego, looking down on others.
Yeah, like they're collecting virtue points, trying to win some cosmic competition or something.
It is a bit like that, isn't it? They're so focused on appearing righteous that they miss the point entirely.
And get this, it can even tank our pursuit of knowledge.
Oh, absolutely. The book calls this form of vanity sakahana.
Sakyaha. I'm guessing that means knowledge.
You guessed right. But in this context, it's about acquiring knowledge just to show off, to appear intelligent.
So it's not about genuine curiosity or wanting to learn and grow.
Nope, it's all about that status symbol. Look at me, I know so much.
Like those people who are always name-dropping philosophers and using big words.
Exactly. It's more about performance than actual learning.
This has been an incredible deep dive, really eye-opening.
It has been fascinating, hasn't it? Really makes you think.
It does. So as we wrap up, what's the key takeaway for our listeners?
Well, I think the biggest thing is to cultivate that awareness, that mindfulness.
Right. Paying attention to our motivations, not just assuming our intentions are good.
Exactly. Ask yourself, why am I doing this? What's really driving me?
It's about becoming more conscious, more intentional in our actions.
It is. And remember, we all have these defilements within us. It's not about being perfect. It's about recognizing them and making more skillful choices.
It's like they say, the unexamined life is not worth living. This deep dive has given us so much to think about, to examine in our own lives.
Absolutely. It's a journey, and these insights are just the beginning.
Well said. And for our listeners, if you find yourselves struggling with these deceptive defilements, don't hesitate to reach out to a teacher or mentor.
Yeah, there's no shame in seeking guidance on this path of self-discovery.
This has been an absolutely incredible deep dive. Thanks for joining us on this journey into the hidden corners of the mind.
It's been my pleasure.
And to everyone listening, keep those masks in check and happy deep diving.